Hi, I'm Ashley, and I'm the host of this channel. This story is about a girl whose own family held a trial to decide whether to disown their daughter just to save the family's honor. But there was something important they didn't know. What exactly was it? You'll find out in this episode. While you listen, you can enjoy a selection of nature clips. Enjoy the show.
The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
I was Savannah Hayes, 18 years old. People assume a quiet house is a peaceful one, but that isn't true. Some silence holds no calm whatsoever. It felt empty. The quiet atmosphere bounced off the walls and sat heavily in my chest. You could scream, and no one would notice. I was raised surrounded by that type of quiet. I wrote that in a journal 9 years ago. At that time, I still thought I might eventually belong to this family. Now I'm Quinn, 27. I stood before the Vance penthouse's huge oak doors, and the same vacant silence hit me again. I hadn't come for a pleasant visit. I was called here. My father's assistant had termed the event a mandatory family restructuring meeting. That phrase felt chilling, sharp, and threatening. I straightened my jacket. I took a deep breath of the stale air conditioning, then opened the doors. Please leave a note below. Have you ever felt like a guest in your own house? I read every story. The Manhattan penthouse looked unchanged since my departure, a perfect museum where nothing was ever disturbed. The family was arranged in the living room, waiting like a court hearing. My father, Robert, sat in his large leather chair. My mother, Alina, sat stiffly on the sofa's edge. My sister and brother stood near the window. They were looking at their phones with matching, bored, superior looks. No one stood up when I entered. They didn't offer any smiles. My father skipped the small talk. He cleared his throat and directed me to sit. He announced that we had to discuss the Vance brand. He stated my current way of life was damaging the business. He described my existence as wandering. He said travel vlogger with a scornful tone, making the job sound like a serious flaw. He explained that Vance Resorts meant stability, tradition, and exclusivity. My social media activity, my continuous traveling and lack of a permanent home was ruining their image. He pushed a stack of legal papers toward me across the mahogany table. It was an official disownment notice. They were cutting off my access to the trust fund. They were taking me out of the will. They planned to legally end all ties to protect the value of the estate. Then my father held out his hand. He wanted the black card, the company credit card, the final symbol of our family status. I looked at him. I saw the man who taught me that personal value depends on where you live. Then I noticed a small thing no one else would have. The cuffs of his tailor-made shirt were slightly worn. A single thread hung by his pricey watch. I surveyed the room. The vases usually held fresh flowers, but now they featured expensive silk replacements. The air conditioning was warmer than the usual setting, maybe 2 degrees higher. Instantly, I realized the issue wasn't my reputation. It was cash flow. Declining wealthy families follow a certain pattern. When they begin losing their real power, their wealth, they desperately increase their focus on symbolic power, their perceived status. They were losing money quickly. They were failing. Instead of seeking assistance, they decided to cut me off. They were trimming what they saw as dead weight, hoping to keep their failing operation running a little longer. They saw me as the burden. They assumed I was the cost they could no longer bear. It was a strange spectacle. Their lack of funds had only made their arrogance much worse. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't tell them they were wrong either. I just reached inside my purse. I pulled out the black card and dropped it onto the table. It made a sharp click sound against the wood. Then I grabbed the pen and signed the papers. The scratch of the ink was the only sound in the room. I signed away my inheritance. I signed away my family name. I signed away the last bit of commitment I had to people who thought of me as just a budget item to delete. I stood up. My sister and brother were grinning. They probably thought they just got a bigger piece of the pie. They didn't get that the pie was actually dust. I walked right out the door without saying goodbye. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It felt final and sharp, like something being cut clean. I took the elevator down 40 floors. I walked past the doorman who had known me since I was a kid. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, but I didn't hail a cab. A black sedan with dark windows was already waiting there for me. The driver opened the door, and I got into the cool leather seat. "Take me to the airfield," I instructed. I pulled out my phone and unlocked the secure application I used to manage my life. My family assumed I was just a travel vlogger because that's what I allowed them to see. They saw pictures of me in Bali, Tokyo, and Lisbon. They read my captions about a laptop lifestyle. What they missed was the computer code on the screen. They didn't see the business deals. They didn't see the company I had built. I founded TransitLink. We run a decentralized network for hospitality. We turned the entire hotel concept on its head. While the family was polishing old details on their failing venture, I was building the escape route. We use property technology, prop tech, to change high-end properties into flexible, fancy workspaces for the new global economy. We don't own the actual buildings. We control the access. We control the network. 20 minutes later, the car stopped at the tarmac. My jet was ready. It wasn't chartered. It was mine. I walked up the stairs, and the flight attendant handed me a glass of water and a tablet. We were just finishing up our Series C funding round. I scrolled through the final numbers. We secured $375 million in new capital. My company's post-money valuation was now $1.1 billion. I leaned back as the engines started roaring. I looked down at the city shrinking below. Somewhere down there, my father, Robert, was probably having a scotch he couldn't afford, proud of himself for cutting costs. For the next year, I watched them from afar. It felt like observing a slow-motion wreck. I saw the headlines in the business sections. Vance Resorts misses quarterly earnings. Vance Collection seeks debt restructuring. The weakness in their operation became obvious. My brother, Julian, crashed a rented Ferrari and tried to keep it quiet, but the dealership sued him for the payments. My sister, Genevieve, who was the vice president of brand image, started firing cleaning staff to save money on payroll, which caused a huge PR disaster. The difference between how they saw themselves and how things really were grew every day. They still acted like royalty, hosting expensive parties and going to charity auctions, wearing borrowed jewelry and smiling for the cameras. But I knew the reality. I knew because I was buying the information. I knew their room occupancy rates were dropping fast. I knew their banks were getting worried. They were using one property's value to pay interest on another. It was a shell game, and they were running out of places to hide the money. Then I got the call. It was a Tuesday night, about 14 months after I had left the penthouse. My phone vibrated on my desk. It was my mother. I hadn't spoken to her since that tribunal meeting. I let the phone ring 3 times before I answered. "Hello, Alina," I said. She didn't say hello back. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't offer an apology. Her voice was sharp, quick, and bossy. "Your father is sick," she stated. "The stress is bad for his heart. We must talk about the estate now. Come to dinner Saturday, the main hotel building, 7 o'clock. It wasn't an invitation. It was a clear demand. Even with their business falling apart around them, they still thought they could order me around. They still viewed me as the troublesome child who needed strict management. "I will be there," I replied. I hung up the phone. I didn't book a regular flight. I told my pilot to get the jet ready. I instructed my assistant to clear my calendar completely. After that, I contacted my legal staff. "Get me the complete file on the Vance debt," I told them. Everything. I arrived in the city late Saturday afternoon. I skipped the penthouse. I went straight to the flagship Vance Resort property. When I walked into the lobby, the smell hit me. It smelled like old dust and desperation. The rugs were worn down in the high-traffic spots. The fresh flowers were missing here, too. The few employees I saw looked overworked and tired. 3 light bulbs in the huge chandelier were burned out. The changes were small, but to someone trained in this business, they were shouting. This place was dying. I took the private elevator up to the owner's private dining room. The family was already seated. My father looked thin and pale gray. His suit hung loosely on his body. My mother was wearing diamonds that I knew cost more to insure than the cash they had access to. My sister and brother were drinking wine, looking anxious. "Sit down, Quinn," my father commanded. I took a seat. I didn't touch the napkin. I didn't reach for the water glass. I just waited for them to speak. "We are in a tough spot," my father began, staring down at his plate. "The market has not been kind to classic hospitality businesses. We have a cash problem." He paused, probably hoping I would gasp or express sympathy. I did neither. I just watched him. "We found a fix," my mother quickly cut in, her voice high-pitched. "A short-term loan, a new partner." She pointed toward the empty chair next to me. "Mr. Thorne is a very rich investor," she said. "He agreed to put capital into the Vance collection. He is very interested in the family background. He is very interested in you, Quinn." I didn't react quickly. The room seemed to wobble for a second. "You want me to marry him?" I asked. I wasn't asking for information. I knew the answer. "It's a smart business alliance," my father insisted, slamming his hand down on the table. "It's what's best for the family. You've been wandering the world like a tourist. It is time you did something useful." He continued. "He will cover our immediate financial needs in return for an introduction and a marriage. He is old-fashioned. He wants a wife from a respectable family." They weren't asking for my help. They were literally selling me off. They were treating me like a tradable piece to get a loan. They still saw me as a thing to be used, an asset they could sell quickly to save themselves. I glanced at my brother. He was staring at the ceiling. I looked at my sister. She was checking her manicure. They were all in on this. They had agreed to it. "Is that all?" I asked them. "That is all," my father confirmed. "You will be charming. You will accept his offer. You will save this legacy." I started laughing. It was a cold, dry laugh that bounced off the dining room walls. I laughed because it was ridiculous. I laughed because they were so pathetic. I laughed because they had no idea who was sitting at their table. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out lipstick or a tissue. I pulled out my tablet. The screen lit up blue in the dim room. The dynamic in the room had just changed. I was no longer the daughter. I was the predator. I swiped the screen and brought up the spreadsheet. "Let's review the facts," I said, my voice dropping to a low, serious tone. "Vance collection, total debt, $135 million. The key properties causing the trouble are the downtown location, the beach resort, and this building right here. The debt coverage ratio is below 0.6. You are currently defaulting on 3 major loan terms." The room went completely silent. My father's face went from pale gray to pure white. "What are you doing?" my brother demanded. "Put that thing away." I ignored him. "The debt notes were combined and sold 6 months ago," I continued. $135 million in bad debt. The entire amount is due in 30 days. The primary owner of that debt is a company called Manticore Group. My mother gasped. She knew that name. Everyone in the industry knew Manticore Group. They were the vultures, the liquidators, the ones who finish a company off. "Manticore is a partner," my father stammered. "We are talking with them." "No," I said. "Manticore is not a partner. Manticore is a liquidation firm. They don't want a partnership. They want the keys." My brother stood up, his face red. "You don't know anything about this. You are just a useless vlogger. You don't understand high-level finance." I didn't yell back. I just reached back into my bag. I took out one thick document bound in blue paper. I slid it across the polished wood table. It stopped directly in front of my father. It was the deed to the main hotel property we were sitting in. "Manticore Group used the foreclosure clause on this building's note this morning," I explained. "You didn't get the official notice because I told the lawyers to hold it until I could give it to you myself." My father stared at the document. His hands were shaking so badly that the silverware rattled against the china. "How do you have this?" he whispered. I leaned forward. "Because I bought the note, Robert. I bought the debt on this building. I bought the debt on the other hotels. I bought all of it for almost nothing through a holding company." I paused, letting the truth sink in. "I am Manticore Group. The silence that followed was total. It was heavy and difficult to breathe. It sounded like their entire world collapsing. They looked at me, but they didn't see the daughter they threw away. They saw the monster they helped create. They saw the checkbook that now controlled their lives. "You," my sister finally whispered. "Me," I confirmed. My father looked like he might pass out. "We did this for the family," he breathed. "We cut you off to protect the legacy. We did what was necessary." I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I thought about the letter I had written in my mind 1,000 times to the person I used to be. "You pushed me away," I said without turning around. "You forced me out of the picture. You believed by excluding me you made me weak. But you didn't grasp one crucial thing about the outside. The outside gives you the clearest view." I turned back to face them. "While you were fighting inside over small details and trying to fix a sinking ship, I was out there creating a new world. I was building the whole structure." I explained that being an outsider wasn't a penalty. It was a business advantage. It meant I didn't have to follow their old-fashioned rules. It meant I saw the future while they worried about the past. My father sank deeper into his chair. "Please," he begged. "Please, Quinn, don't ruin us." I looked at them. They were small now. They were defeated. Ruining them would be easy. It would be pointless and boring. "I don't plan to ruin you," I said. I walked back to the table and tapped the tablet screen. "I'm acquiring the Vance collection. I'm merging it into Transit Link. We are going to rebrand every single property. The tired luxury look and the old rules are over. We are turning them into tech-enabled, flexible living spaces." "You can't do that," my brother weakly protested. "That's our history." "It's my property now," I corrected him, "and I can do exactly what I want with it." I slid a new contract across the table. "I'm offering you jobs," I stated. "Jobs?" my mother asked, a tiny bit of hope in her eyes. "Executive roles." "No," I replied. I looked at my sister. "You care about appearances. You care how things look. You will be the director of customer experience. You will manage the front desk procedures. You will handle guest complaints. You will serve the clients." I looked at my brother. "You care about money. You will work in procurement. You will budget for things like soap and towels. You will learn the actual cost of $1. I looked at my father. "You are retiring, effective immediately. You will sign over your voting shares and you will move out of the penthouse by the end of this week." "You can't be serious," my father said. "Those are the terms," I concluded. "You sign and you keep a salary, you keep your health coverage, you keep a shred of self-respect. You refuse and I foreclose on everything tomorrow morning. You will be bankrupt before noon." The pen rested in the middle of the table. It was the heaviest object in the room. My father looked at my mother. He looked at my siblings. He looked around the walls of the place that had defined him. Then, with a trembling hand, he picked up the pen. He signed. He passed it to my mother, then my sister, then my brother. They signed their defeat. I took the contract. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I simply put it away in my bag. I walked out of the room. I left the hotel. I stepped into the cool night air. I didn't look back at the ruined empire I had just taken over. I checked my phone. My team was already releasing the press statement. The new branding was live. I hadn't destroyed the old structure. I had simply modernized it. There is a certain type of justice when you plant seeds in the same dirt that tried to cover you up. The best payback isn't leaving your enemy with nothing. It is making them work to achieve your goal. It is taking the legacy they tried to deny you and making it look exactly how you want it to look. My phone buzzed again. It was a notification from my apartment building. Welcome home. I used a digital key to unlock my door. I walked inside. It was quiet, but this time the quiet wasn't empty. It felt peaceful. It was the quiet of a stable structure, a solid foundation, and a life that was completely and totally mine. If you ever had to build your own table because they wouldn't give you a seat, please share this story. You are the architect.